Hi there, and welcome to the Plugged In Show. I'm Paul Acey. Is TikTok bad? That's a twofold question. Certainly, the short-form social media platform has been at the center of plenty of controversy, and by the time you listen to this episode, TikTok might have been technically banned. But the truth is, no one's going to be taking the app off your smartphone, and at Plugged In, our biggest concern with TikTok isn't who owns it, but how we use it.
Exactly.
And by extension, how people, especially teens, use other short-form video platforms. Because whatever happens to TikTok, the type of content that made it so popular isn't going anywhere. And after we talk about those short-form videos, we'll turn our attention to a much longer video. That is a movie. It's called Between Borders, and it stars Elizabeth Tabish, who many of you probably know as Mary Magdalene from The Chosen. I sit down and talk with Elizabeth about her career, her faith, and about her newest project.
That's cool.
So there's going to be a lot to talk about, so let's go ahead and dive in. So, we're talking about TikTok.
Yeah.
But let's not talk about TikTok specifically in the icebreaker. Short form videos are a kind of a new thing within the landscape of media, but when you're talking about grabbing somebody's attention, that's not new at all. And movies have often done it better than anywhere else. So when you think of a movie, tell me about a movie where you sat down, you watched for 5 minutes, and you said, I am all in on this. I can't wait to see what happens next.
Ooh, good question.
Yeah.
Jonathan.
Oh my gosh, so many thoughts come to mind. And I'm going to go back for your sake, Paul.
Ooh.
I'm going to go back to an Orson Welles film starring Charlton Heston
Wow.
and Orson Welles, where he put on like all this weight and prosthetics and stuff like that.
And he
A
never took it
Touch
off.
of Evil. He never took it off. A Touch of Evil. A Touch of Evil is unique in that, and this is might only be for film nerds. So listeners that are film nerds, if you haven't seen this one, he does one of the longest opening shots without a cut. And think of how hard this would be to edit. This is like the old boy fight scene type length of a shot. I mean, we're talking a long shot where, oh my goodness. And it's about 3.5 minutes long, and 3.5 might not sound long, but it is a long, complicated shot. And I just was like, this guy knows how to shoot. And nobody like Hitchcock and Orson Welles, to me, drags me. And I'm not even a big Citizen Kane fan. I'm not going to jump on that bandwagon, but homie knows how to shoot.
Yeah, that is a good pull. I've never seen Touch of Evil, honestly. I need to see that.
It's really good. At least the first 3.5 minutes you got to see.
I need to check that out too.
Brett, you got anything for us?
Yes, I do. Well, Lord of the Rings tends to get a lot of love on the Plugged In Show. But, you know, as I was thinking through this, really, I think Fellowship of the Ring sticks out to me. When I watched it, the original prologue that kicks off that movie, that kind of explains all of the background that you need in Lord of the Rings.
Opening battle where Galadriel is talking.
Yeah, we're talking Galadriel's talking, the ring is forged, the story's laid out, you have that big battle, and you see what happens to the ring. You see Sauron's defeat, and what happens to the ring.
Kennedy would make fun of me for being so ignorant, but I wasn't thinking of Fellowship. I was thinking of, was it Two Towers that starts off with the backstory of Gollum when he's actually, you know.
That's Return of the King, yeah.
Is it Return of the King?
So I mean, they all have really good intros, right? Because then Two Towers shows Gandalf fighting the Balrog, like when they were falling down the
That's
pit.
how that one starts.
That's how that one
So
starts.
I was off. I missed it twice.
You did miss it twice.
I missed it twice.
That's okay.
But isn't it funny, though? Because I was sitting there thinking, that is such a good, to me, that one.
Yes.
The third movie, Return of the King, which I had to leave to go pee twice in the middle of that film.
It was long enough.
It was
but,
long.
But really, I think Fellowship of the Ring, because it just establishes in a very efficient way. If listeners know anything about Lord of the Rings, they know there is a lot of lore around the edges of Lord of the Rings. But what they did in that movie was set up the stakes of the world perfectly, all of the major characters. You knew right away, okay, this ring, if it gets back into Sauron's hands, it's going to be a bad deal, right? So all the stakes were established early on in the movie. So when we hit the ground running, we were right along there with them.
You know, I tell you what, my favorite part of that particular scene is when the elves are doing like their color guard routine with the. Oh, it's just so cool with
They're
their
fighting
little.
the orcs?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
It's very
That is
cool.
pretty cool.
It's a good scene.
So I am going to land, I think, right in between these two movies. Right, you went old, Brett. You went fairly new. I'm going to go Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh my
Yeah, it's
goodness.
hard to beat.
I thought about it.
I think that is almost the quintessential opening scene of any movie ever. I loved just the whole thing where he's walking into this tomb. There's all these traps. He gets the idol, and then all of a sudden, it's just chaos from that moment.
Yep.
Throw me the whip. Throw me the idol. Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Alfred Molina.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, and it's a good point. You learn everything you need to know about the character of Indiana Jones
Yeah.
coming out of that, all the way down to he hates snakes, even
he
at the
hates
very
snakes.
end. So.
And that's actually maybe my favorite part of that,
Yeah.
because you watch that opening sequence and you see
This guy has no fear.
Yeah.
He
tough as
he
nails.
He
knows
turns-
exactly what he's doing, and then he sees the
Turns
snake
to
and
glass,
he's going,
yeah.
"Oh my goodness!"
That's another film series where all three of those original movies, I feel like you could make a case for the opening scene.
Yeah, you
So
really
if
Very
we're
good.
voting, I'm going to vote for Indiana Jones of those three. I got to admit that is the best one.
That's pretty
Yeah,
good.
it's a really good one.
No, that's really good. Good poll.
Well, I tell you what, I do know that there are probably people who love TikTok just as much as I love the opening scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah, sadly so.
It is one of the world's most popular social media platforms, and it is particularly popular with kids. More than 1.5 billion users use TikTok regularly. And apparently, 60% of folks under the age of 30 say they use it. So it is a huge, powerful
sure.
influence. So first off, the very first question is, why is TikTok so popular?
I think in simplest terms, because it's fun. Or maybe to be a little more accurate, right? You get that dopamine hit from a very short amount of time with the video. That's how it's set up, is watch a video of something you're interested in. You get that dopamine hit, and then you just
instant
keep
voting
rolling.
power of just nope, scroll. Oh yes, good. Okay, nope, scroll.
Yeah.
I mean, you can just fine tune anything you want with the power of a swipe, and the scary part is there's that algorithm there that's figuring that
Yeah, I
out
know.
and going this person sometimes not even just what you hit like to, but stays longer on videos of a guy dancing wearing a mask, so I'm going to give him more guys wearing a mask dancing. And that's what makes it so addictive and makes it a huge time suck. Before you realize it, you spent 45 minutes and you're like, what?
Yeah.
I can't believe that. It's just, it really does. It is engrossing. Yeah, I'll admit it is fun. You get on there and all of a sudden, and before you know it, you lost half your day.
Well, and that's really true, right? And when you're talking about these social media platforms that specialize in that short form video, the algorithms are so sophisticated now, right? Where they give you more and more and more of what you want. Now, there's a lawsuit by, I think, 13 attorneys general that are actually suing TikTok now because they say that TikTok knows what it does to kids, and they haven't done anything about it. They allege within the lawsuit that it takes about 35 minutes for a child to get addicted to this stuff. Does that surprise you?
Yeah, it took about 10 minutes for me to get addicted. So yeah, I believe it. It was.
You're ahead of the curve.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I truly downloaded it years ago when it first switched from Musical.ly, because I thought, what is this that kids are, what is this TikTok thing?
Right.
And at that time, it wasn't even number one. And so I downloaded it. I started watching videos. And the first thing that struck me is I looked down at my clock and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how much time just went by.
Yeah.
It was literally the first thing that struck me. The second thing that struck me was how uncensored it was with just like language and attitude and irresponsibility. And it's not, I mean, a lot of people be like, is it pornographic? Is it? No, it's just kind of like sometimes it can be really innocent. Oh, a funny dog video,
Sure.
And if you click on more funny dog videos, then that's what you're going to get more of. But the question is, what are your kids going to spend time looking at? And if they like watching kind of sexy people dancing, they're going to see a lot more sexy people dancing.
Yeah.
If they like kind of people that are getting in wrecks and going, whoa, that was cool, they're going to get a lot more of, whoa, that was cool,
Yeah.
And that's kind of, it's just, there's not really anyone monitoring it, other than like, oh, well, make sure there's no porn on there or whatever. So there's just a lot of irresponsibility.
Well, I would say that's kind of where the algorithm that you mentioned comes into play as well, because kids could start watching something something fairly innocent, right?
Yeah.
And that could lead to something else that maybe is, still somewhat innocent, but maybe a little more tangentially connected, at least in the algorithm's mind, right? And you're going to get more of these videos, and they just could go down a path where you wouldn't want them to go.
Well, and I just think about myself when I was 15 years old, those paths would have been very enticing to me. So you can imagine when you're a teen, that's going to be the experience of a lot of teens who are using this, right?
Well, and I tried the first time I said, let me try to get as innocent as possible on this thing to see if someone could go an innocent track on this. So kind of like, on the clock as a researcher, I literally went into settings, and there was back then, and I know the settings have changed. They've made quite a few changes. We could talk about some of them, but you could kind of set it to a more edited version. I can't remember what it was called at the time, and I tried that, and I still just trying to, a funny wiener dog video. Cool. Thumbs up, trying to stick on those. I kept getting language, like really bad language. And so I tried to, when I'd hear that, I'd swipe away really quick to try to, avoid it. I couldn't avoid bad content, is what it was. And and I know listeners, feel free to chime in on the comment section here, because I know some of you might be like, hey, I watch lots of TikTok and I never encounter that. Tell us your experience, because I find even today, and I had some slow weeks in December, and I got back on it because I knew we were going to talk about it. And I kind of looked at it again. I found myself laughing and finding a lot of innocent stuff, but I also found a lot of stuff that I thought, man, I'd be really concerned if my 15-year-old, if my 17-year-old was soaking this in at the rate that young people are soaking this in today.
Oh, and I saw a statistic as well, some recent research that said, average TikTok user, maybe it's around 95 minutes a day, right, from TikTok.
Yeah.
Which, on its face, maybe that doesn't sound like too terribly much. You could play a video game for a lot longer or something along those lines. But what that boils down to, or what it can on TikTok, shorter videos, right? Smaller sample size. You're talking about hundreds of different videos
or whatever,
by hundreds of different creators.
Yeah.
So I think the volume alone makes it harder to manage.
One of the other problems that I could foresee when we're talking about this too is that creative aspect to it, right? Because, TikTok, like so many other social media forums, they rely on the users to create content for it. And when you're a teen, engaged in creating content for TikTok, that can lead to some pretty problematic areas too, can't it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say so. There's just less maybe development in terms of, okay, I shouldn't say this. Right. What is appropriate? What is the filter, right? When it's just coming from a younger person who's lived less life. And they might be putting themselves out there in a way as well that they don't realize might be a little bit dangerous.
And when they're being encouraged to perhaps go in those different directions, that can be ever more problematic.
Very true.
Right?
I would probably even have two different levels of concern, which, it could almost be two different podcasts. A consumer of TikTok versus trying to be an influencer on TikTok. Mm-hmm. Consumer, I definitely have some concerns. Number one, huge time suck. I'm just going to use that term because it's a common term. It before you know it, you spent so much time on the thing. Two, there's kind of an attitude and some imagery that can be very problematic. If you spend that much time on there, you're going to encounter some of that stuff. No brainer. So when it comes to that, that's that conversation about as a consumer of TikTok. As an influencer, we've had those podcasts, and I encourage you let's put it in the episode notes where we've interviewed influencers. We've talked about that. The incredible pressure put upon young influencers today. Oh my gosh, I don't have enough followers. Oh, how come they didn't like this video? Oh, let me try another one. That kind of pressure on young people is not good for their mental health. And there's more and more studies coming out about that. Anytime where you're trying to get likes, trying to get followers, it puts an incredible pressure on young people. And creating that kind of pressurized environment on someone going through adolescence is logarithmically worse than someone in their 20s or 30s. And I could tell you as an author who was, every time I was writing a book and I was on social media and I was like, okay, let me post this, whatever. As an old dude, as a grown man, I was constantly like, well, how come this guy's book got more than
I
me? You know,
totally
how
resonate
come
with that.
Paul's book got more than mine? You know, whatever. I was constantly like, you can't help but do that, because when you're even submitting a proposal for a book, they go, how many followers do you have?
Yeah.
They add publishers, evil publishers, ask you. They go, how many followers do you have? So you kind of get stuck in that thing.
Yep.
Can you imagine now you're 12, you're 16, and you're like, oh, how many followers do I have? I don't have as many as them, or I want to become an influencer. That's an incredible amount of pressure, and almost maybe a different conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's a really valuable point, I think, when you're talking about these two different conversations. So let's stick with just the idea of being a consumer. When we're talking about it, and I know that you've spent a lot of time talking with parents about this and other social media platforms, Jonathan. When you talk to parents, what do you advise them to? How do you deal with TikTok and sort of related platforms? Is that something where you say, I would advise parents to just shut it down, or is there a different path that you would advise?
Whenever a parent comes up to me after one of my parent workshops and asks me a question about, okay, so my kid's on TikTok, I always right then go, wait. Let me ask you a quick question. What question do you think I ask him?
How old?
How old's your kid?
Yep.
That's the first question I ask, because they go, well, my 8-year-old. I'm like, shut it down, because all the research is showing. I mean, Jonathan Haidt's An Anxious Generation is pounding out the research. I've obviously in so many of my books put it out there. Most of us who research this stuff agree that your kids, first of all, shouldn't even be on social media till they're 13. They'd have to lie about their age to be on social media before they're age 13. So there's a no-brainer, but Jonathan went as far as to say, hey, I don't think they should be on social media till they're 16. Don't give them their own device till high school. Don't have them on social media till 16. So I often will ask, and if they're like my 17-year-old, okay, that's a different conversation than their 13-year-old or their 15-year-old.
Right.
What I tell that parent of the 8-year-old, 12-year-old, 13-year-old is, I talk about some of those age limits. I say, hey, remember what you just heard in the workshop? I said, I stick with that with TikTok. First of all, if they're 12 and they're signing up for TikTok, they're lying about their age, so there's a no-brainer for you, and I also hesitate giving a 8, 10, or 12-year-old their own device. But even a 12, 14, 16-year-old, if they had their own device and we're showing responsibility and we talked about some of these things, I would say, let's keep these devices out of the bedroom at night. The older a kid gets, the more I would say you got to empower them to make some of these decisions. A 16 or 17-year-old, I don't know if I would go as far as to say no TikTok. I might be able to say no phones after 8 o'clock at night or whatever. So that way it just keeps them from all night looking at TikTok at least.
And that's one of the things, right? Because not only are we talking about you can run into some bad content on TikTok, but even if all the content is completely innocent, you're talking about a huge amount of time potentially where you lose track of time. And if you have your phones in your bedroom, you could be scrolling for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours longer than you think you're going to.
And most recent studies show 8 out of 10 teens have their phones in their bedrooms all night long. 8 out of 10. So we might think, well, not a lot of kids have their phone. No, a lot of kids have their phone in their bedroom all night long.
Yeah, and we Plugged In have done a blog on how social media and devices affect sleep. We've looked into that as well and referenced some of the research as well. It's a real thing that is making it difficult, right, for parents and teens as well when they have that access.
Yeah. That's where I think so kind of like the so what. Okay, so what do we do as parents if this is a important thing with sleep? I spent a whole chapter in my Parenting Generation Screen talking about sleep and all kinds of research. And my so what at the end of that chapter is, okay, parents, what are you gonna do? Just say no because I said so. No, I think the best thing to do with any of these things is to dialogue with our kids about it. And I say, share some of this research. Hey, look, the National Sleep Foundation showed that kids who have devices in their rooms at night get this much less hours. Is that correct? This much less?
This much
less hours.
I believe that's the correct terminology.
This fewer amount of hours of sleep. I don't even know how to say it. But anyway, they get less sleep, all right? So the thing is, you share that with them and say, hey, what do you think?
Yeah.
Start that dialogue, and then together come up with a plan of, hey, what do you think would be best for you? What time is that time where we should collect phones. Notice not should we collect phones. What time is that time
Right.
where we should collect phones?
And that's a really valuable piece of information too, because I think that it helps to bring kids into these conversations, right? And to give them at least a sense of participation. But at the same time, you do sort of have to have some guidelines where you say, this is what is going to happen. How should we go about doing this? So
absolutely.
I think that's really valuable.
Give them a choice.
And one thing I would bring up too, just for parents, examine your own screen habits as well, right? Because if you're encouraging your kids, hey, we need to lay off TikTok here, and you're going down that TikTok wormhole consistently, right? I imagine it's just going to make it harder for your kids to really want to get on board because they don't feel like it's necessarily a family commitment, right?
And maybe this is, and I'm just spitballing here, but I mean, one thing I'll admit is that the older I get, the more I realize I don't know nothing. And so that's why I'm spitballing here, because I have some things I've noticed. I've seen the poor mental health. I've seen some of these trends. But at the same time, I also know that when our kids grow to be 18 years old, they can make these decisions on their own in a Army barracks or their dorm room or wherever. And I want as much as possible to empower them for that day when they're going to make these decisions on their own. Another thing I know is I hate how much, and this is me personally, this isn't even research. This is just my personal opinion. I don't like the isolationism, I made up a word, of these phones, because it makes kids looking at their own screen instead of participating in those around them.
Yep.
And I wish that there was ways that if we even engaged in social media, we could do it together. And so here's an idea. I think if your kids really like TikTok, and your kids are old enough to be on TikTok and stuff, and you collect phones or whatever, just as much as I used to when my kids were growing up, I would be like, hey, let's find a family show we could watch together. And we would try to watch something as a family. And the benefit being, and I would always say, because they're like, well, what's the difference of looking at our screen versus, I'm like, because we talk, we're looking at the same screen. We dialogue with each other as opposed to us each being in our own world off by ourselves. We're dialoguing together. What if you can literally on YouTube, you can throw up a funny video that's from TikTok and you can start scrolling. You can literally just start scrolling through it on YouTube. You could do it. I've done it before. Wouldn't it be fun to say, hey, do you guys want to watch this show or do you want to watch funny videos? And if they say funny videos, say, okay, who wants to drive? And hand them that, because I can share my phone to my screen. And I've done it before. For Christmas videos, I was showing my family some funny YouTube videos, and literally we were sitting there scrolling on my phone on the big screen as a family laughing together. Why not do it together?
I think that brings up a really important point that we try to drive home again and again at Plugged In. One of the things that you have to be mindful of is using entertainment to bind us closer together as families instead of separating us. And that's one of the dangers of the phone, is that it just isolates us. We can all watch separate things on our own separate devices.
Isolationism.
Instead of having that community. Thank you guys so much for this conversation. I wish we could talk for ages more about it. But if you want to dive into this topic a little bit more, let me suggest a great resource. Parenting Generation Screen, Guiding Your Kids to Be Wise in a Digital World by our very own Jonathan McKee. You've mentioned it a couple of times during this conversation. It really is a great, great resource. I've read it. It's fantastic. He deals with these topics in a very, well, like he talks on the podcast, right? It's very down to earth. It's very realistic. So I would encourage you, for a gift of any amount, send it to us here at Plugged In. And we would be happy to send you a copy of Jonathan's book, Parenting Generation Screen. Just go to the Plugged In Show homepage and we'll tell you how to do that in the show notes. I am thrilled to be here talking with Elizabeth Tabish. She is very familiar to many of you from her work on The Chosen. She has a new movie out called Between Borders. It's super exciting to have you here, Elizabeth. I'm thrilled that we're able to talk with you. And I just wanted to start off by asking you about the new movie. So Between Borders, it's a really unique movie about this family, essentially, that is truly living between borders, having a hard time finding a home. Can you unpack that a little bit more?
Yeah. So it's about the Petrosian family. They are an Armenian family.
And they're a real family, right? This is
real
based on a true
family. I got to meet them while we were filming. Actually, they're wonderful. Um, but it starts in Azerbaijan. They are born. They've grown up there. That's their home, their community. They have fantastic jobs. Yvonne is a rocket scientist,
Literally
and
a rocket scientist.
literally, and Violetta is a school principal. So they have these very prestigious jobs, and they're very like well established. It's their home, and then the ethnic tensions and threats become so overwhelming. They have to flee immediately. They witness some really horrific things to their neighbors, to their Armenian neighbors, and they have to leave, or else they don't know what will happen to them. So they go to Volgograd, Russia. They're granted, they're allowed to stay there technically, but the experiences they have there are really challenging for them. They're still threatened and they're bullied, and the tensions are still just really palpable. And while they're there, one of the only really safe places that they can kind of start to build, a sense of safety in is this Christian church that some missionaries built. They came from West Virginia, and they're there to help anyone who needs it. And so their first interaction with this church is just them bringing them furniture and helping them out as they are completely, they've left everything behind, so they don't have anything with them. And we witnessed them kind of learn about this religion, but also how it affects them and their decisions. And at the end of the day, they're always trying to protect their family and take care of their two girls. And eventually they come to America to share their story, and they end up applying for citizenship. And so we watch that journey as well, which has its own struggles. But the whole thing is this search for home. And we realize, I think later on in the film, that no matter where these governments decide is their home in this on Earth, they have found a deeper sense of security in their faith.
Yeah. It feels like it is a story that is very pertinent to our time, as we talk about how we welcome people from different countries into our own and all of that. It has a really powerful resonance to it. Is that one of the things that attracted you to this role?
Yeah, I mean, my own family, so my grandmother and great grandmother are Armenian, and so we're part Armenian. I grew up listening to them speak Armenian to each other, and they are immigrants, and there's a sense of identity from them that I feel a real care for in telling stories of immigrants. And it's a story that shows what America has been to so many people who have come here and needed a place for refuge. And it's also one of the most, I think, Christian elements of the country that, the poem at the bottom of the Statue of Liberty reminds us of, bring me your poor, your weary masses. And it's a beautiful story. And also, I've never been able to play a character that is other than The Chosen. So The Chosen and this have been the only two times I've been able to play my own ethnicity. Wow. And that has been something really special for me, to not have to hide or be something different. And so I get to play Middle Eastern in The Chosen, which I am part Middle Eastern, and then also Armenian in this. So that's special to me.
Yeah, that's fascinating to me. And when you look at the two characters, the Mary Magdalene obviously and Violet in Between Borders, they have some similarities in a way where they're very different characters, obviously, but
are, yeah.
In terms of kind of their search for something, you meet them in some ways when they're at rock bottom. And you find this pathway to both physical and spiritual redemption, in a way. Is that story arc, is that something that attracts you to characters that you play?
Before I booked The Chosen, I was doing mostly commercial work, and it's pretty one-dimensional. And I was also really frustrated with some of the auditions I was getting in my 20s. When I first read the audition for Mary Magdalene, I was so excited and so relieved to see a fully fleshed out female character with these sort of complicated and complex psychologies and backstory and emotions. And it was lovely to watch a story of a woman who is in sort of the depths of despair and see how it doesn't have to be a sad ending. And we see how this redemptive arc just, brings her completely to the light. And she has this very, very peaceful and joyful purpose. And so, so that in and of itself was like the first time I was like, this is such a great character, whether it's faith-based or not. And then reading the script for Between Borders, I felt that same sort of thing of like, this woman goes from really wondering if they're even going to survive through the night to, at the end of it, not actually worried about what the politics announce her home is. Like they're waiting to see if they're allowed to be in America or if they're going back to Russia. And we see this confidence in her of whatever is going to happen will happen. Yeah. And I have faith that God will protect us and take care of us. And so there's just like this real transformation in both of them that I adore.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that
I have to apologize for my heater is making noises. We've got
I totally get it. Totally get it. I did want to mention one of the things that really appeals to me about your work is that you're able to, obviously you've been in now a few really prominent faith-based productions. One of the things that you bring to these roles is that sense of reality. I think that Christian products, they tend to feel, they have a reputation, I guess, of maybe feeling a little bit thin, a little bit one-dimensional. The work that you did in The Chosen, especially in that first episode, I think is one of the reasons why The Chosen took off like it did, because you felt that need, you felt that emotional pull, and it brought faith kind of down to our level. And it feels like when we're looking at some of the faith-based works that we're seeing now, it seems like there is sort of a push into greater depth in the characterization that we're seeing. Would you say that would be fair?
I think that was the surprise when I first read the script for The Chosen of like, this is just really good storytelling.
Yeah.
And it's also, I guess the question is then what is good storytelling? And, I think it's things that we can actually relate to. And being a human is messy and we make mistakes and it's gritty sometimes. And people go through traumas and heartbreak and grief. Yeah. And I think sometimes the faith-based storytelling maybe of the past has been, I think, sort of mixed in with family friendly, and those two things are not necessarily the same.
Not necessarily.
They become sanitized and they become very like a little confectionery, and you find Jesus and then everything's easy and like yes, but life still happens and you get triggered and you get it is a process. Any sort of walk in faith is a process. And so I think these stories are starting to show the process a little bit more, which helps us as viewers relate to these characters and see these were not always saints. The characters that we know from history, that we know from the Gospels, they were other people before they met Jesus, before they were changed. And I think it's really important to show like that's actually how things go. That's actually how life works.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think people are starting to see these stories as just really good storytelling. And this one in particular is a true story. So, the shift maybe was sci-fi, but like this is about real people. And so, I think a lot of people will be able to relate to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think I heard somewhere that before The Chosen came along, you were trying to quit acting. Is that true?
Yes. I was not really making ends meet, and I was very unfulfilled as an actor. I was doing commercial work and just struggling and I couldn't make rent one month, and my mom had me move in with her, and I was like, I need to change my direction. I need to pivot. And I was really planning on going more into directing and editing and maybe teaching, or maybe going back to school and just find something that was a little bit more stable, because acting is hard.
It's
And
hard.
it's not just acting, it's auditioning, and just it's constant rejection, and you're constantly sort of presenting yourself to a table full of people who are deciding your fate. And it's dependent on if you look the right way, if you're what ethnicity you are, if you're skinny enough, if like there's all these things that feel like you're just kind of constantly being judged.
Yeah, yeah,
And when you're rejected that many times, like you're like, well, I'm not good enough, and maybe I shouldn't be doing this. So the joy of acting is sort of missed for a little bit, and that's where I was at. I was like, this isn't fun anymore.
yeah.
And I can't make rent anymore, so I need to change. So I told my agent to stop submitting me, and he was like, I'm going to keep you on the roster in case something really great pops up, which I was like, that's never going to happen. But turns out it did.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Incredible. Yeah, it does seem like just the career of an actor would just be unimaginable, because you have to put yourself out so much in these auditions, right? You're in some ways you're kind of bearing your soul when you're playing a part.
Yeah.
And that can be really draining, I would imagine.
Yeah. Well, and you do it, and if you don't get it, you beat yourself up, and you're like, what could I have done differently? And you're kind of constantly self-reflecting on what's wrong with you.
Yeah.
And that's not true for every actor. I think there are healthier attitudes to have, but that's what I was doing.
Mhm.
And that was part of the decision of like, I need to stop nitpicking myself. And so if that means quitting acting, then I need to probably quit acting, because it wasn't healthy at that time. So yeah, but this new chapter kind of started a whole other thing for me, where I've learned to stop overthinking if I'm good enough. And you go through this struggle as an actor constantly. Can I do this role? Am I capable of doing this role? And then you realize, again, it's the journey, it's a process, and to look for the joy in it, and look for the growth in it, and learn from the people that you get to work with, and learning to have fun with it again, which
can be difficult.
Very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting as you talk, and this was not an area that I was going to take this, but it feels to me when you're talking about sort of that rediscovery of finding the joy in acting, and being secure within yourself, no matter what comes up in an audition or whatnot. It feels like that is in some ways a message that we find in The Chosen and in Between Borders. The idea that, in The Chosen, it's very, very, you are truly accepted in this community for who you are. And Between Borders, you talked about how there was this sense of peace no matter what the government's decided at the end. I know that acting is a job, but when you dive so deeply into these roles, do these roles actually sort of help that process a little bit?
Oh yeah, no, I learn from my characters constantly. And each season of The Chosen too has been like, I feel like there's like a very specific lesson each season. And for Between Borders, it was my first lead in a feature film, and I was so nervous about doing it right and correct, and that's always what I'm always thinking is, am I going to mess this up? And then I'm lucky to get to play these characters that are so strong.
Yeah.
And they kind of teach me how to be confident, how to be strong, how to stand up for what's right and stand up for yourself, and grow with them. It's such a gift. Violetta Petrosian, the actual woman that I've gotten to meet and get to know and absolutely adore, is such an inspiration of just like really, really, truly putting all of her faith in God and we see what's happened in her life, and it's such a beautiful thing. And so as I'm going into this role and I'm thinking, am I going to get this right? I think about what she actually went through and what she's actually done. And I'm like, this should just be fun. This is art. This is a representation of real life. And I'm grateful I get to learn from someone like her.
Yeah. You mentioned that you were thinking about getting back into directing a little bit when you were sort of on this crossroads. Is that something that eventually you would like to move into? What do you enjoy most, being in front of the camera or behind it?
Honestly, I love directing so much. I feel more comfortable as a director. I'm really, I don't really like being seen. I don't really like being watched.
How interesting.
When I was doing theater, I would get stage fright all of the time, and even on set, I get nervous.
Wow.
Being in a character and having an accent is a really great thing to sort of hide on. A lot of these scenes are emotional and vulnerable and kind of embarrassing, and so it takes a lot out of you. They're cathartic sometimes and meaningful, so it's all worth it. But in terms of what feels really natural to me, I feel like directing is more natural.
Yeah.
I like organizing. I like connecting with actors. I like trying to get certain emotions and styles out. And also just like visually, I love shot selections and telling stories through so many different elements, through costume, through music, through coloring, through scene selection. So I get really excited, clearly, about directing. So that's definitely something that I'd like to get back into. I haven't had much time in the last few years because the show's been go, which is wonderful. I mean, such a dream. But I do think probably after The Chosen, I'm going to pivot back to the directing world.
Well, I'm super excited to see what you direct, honestly. I think that would be super fun. So I know we're running out of time. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for being with us. Between Borders is coming out January 26th. It's definitely worth the watch. Thank you so much for being with us.
Appreciate you. Thanks.
All right, and now it is time for one of my very favorite parts of the podcast. We are doing Pop Culture Connection, and joining us is our producer, Ashley. Hey, Ashley.
Hey, Paul.
That's awesome.
Makes me so happy.
Yeah, for sure.
So what we are going to do here is Ashley is going to give us a question. We have to answer it within 30 seconds or less. Give as many answers as possible. Jonathan, no cheating this time. And
now,
Ashley,
Paul, do these just have to be like, a good quality answer or just quantity?
It is just, and Ashley, I will tell you, she is a very kind judge.
Okay.
She
So
sometimes
quantity.
I will count like 3 points and she will have like 27.
Okay.
So
Okay.
Sometimes
Just
I
wanted
put
to make
half
sure.
points in there.
Because I get mixed messages from you, Paul, and I just wanted to
I don't
make
think
sure
the
I
message
understood.
is mixed. I don't think
I
it's
just wanna
really
make sure
that
I
mixed.
understood.
He's
Anyway.
looking for an edge in the game. That's all.
Yeah, that's it. Okay.
All right, take it
All
away,
right.
Ashley.
I have some kind of generic open-ended questions this time around.
Okay.
All right. So, Brett, you're up first.
Oh boy.
I want to know best superhero and why.
Best superhero has got to be Batman,
Oh,
of
my
course,
goodness.
because he's a regular person, right? So that adds to his heroism. He can be killed by any number of things that go wrong, right? So he doesn't have superpower, super strength, invincibility, anything like that. So he's a better superhero than Superman or like the Flash with super speed. Batman has to rely on his wits, right? He's got to use a lot of money. It helps, but he uses it to make all sorts of gadgets that get him out of sticky situations.
Very nice. Very
See, that's why
nice.
Brett and I get along so well.
Yes, I can
Got to
see
be
that.
Batman.
Got to be Batman.
Got to be Batman. Awesome. 6 points.
All right.
Good job. All right, Jonathan.
Oh man, I'm scared with Paul sitting here overseeing
Can
me.
I glare at you?
Oh, wow.
Intimidation.
Wow. All right. Best 80s sitcom and why?
Oh man. Oh, I'm going to go with something controversial because now he's so controversial, but I got to say The Cosby Show because back then it was so good. Such a good family show. The characters were so good. The kids were real. The dialogue from parents, the situations the parents would get in with their kids with like discipline or whatever. Plus, they had that friend Bud. He was worth it all. It was, Bill was funny. What can we say? He was awesome until we knew what we know now.
All right. 8 points. Good
done.
job.
I counted 2.
Aw. Wow. All right, Paul.
All right, I'm ready.
All right. Here we go. Best recent movie you have seen and why?
Oh, it's got to be The Wild Robot because it is a beautifully animated movie, has a really sweet story about motherhood, has a lot of things to say about sacrifice. It has a lot of messages actually about technology as well. Plus, we talked with Chris Sanders, the director, on this very podcast. It was a fascinating conversation. He has done a lot of great things just about family. He's done The Croods, How to Train Your Dragon. I think it is probably one of the most beautiful movies I saw in 2024.
Nice. Because you had those extra movies that he has done, you got extra points. 9 points. Good job. Paul's the winner.
Oh,
man.
Woo-woo.
that's good. I was going to say it was such great quality, even though the quantity wasn't 9 points, but actually was gracious. But that was great quality. I haven't seen that, and that,
It's a really great movie.
Yeah, it sounds awesome.
It is a beautiful movie. I think it might be my favorite movie of the year.
how cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's really cool.
All right. Thank you guys so much for joining us today on the Plugged In Show. And thank you, listeners and viewers, for listening and viewing. We would love to hear what you have to say about TikTok. Do you guys watch it? Do you have concerns with it? What is going to be the next thing that comes after TikTok? Because there's always going to be something that comes after TikTok.
Yeah.
And also tell us what you thought about our conversation with Elizabeth. We had a great time talking with her. We'd love to hear what you thought about that as well. Are you going to see Between Borders? Tell us all about it on Instagram or Facebook, or leave us a voice message on the Plugged In Show homepage. Leave us a note at team@thepluggedinshow.com, or just comment below on our Plugged In blog. That would also be great. And be sure to join us next time on the Plugged In Show.